Hello, and welcome to Collie Conversations, the podcast that's all about transforming your life with your Border Collie. I'm Gemma Fisher, your expert in all things collie. Whether you're dealing with reactivity, recall struggles, or just looking to understand your collie better, you've come to the right place. I'm here to help you turn those frustrating behaviours into wins with practical advice and real life solutions. If you haven't already, head over to our Facebook group to get your collie questions answered in my weekly live Q&A session. Plus, the group has training guides, my recommended resources from the podcast, and lots of other extra support and tips for collie owners just like you. Today, we'll be discussing the importance that rules and structure play in helping our collies feel safe and happy. So grab a cup of tea and get ready to take some notes. Let's get started. So I'm going to start with this statement. Border Collies need clear structure and expectations. I firmly believe that that is how to get the best out of our Border Collies. But what does that look like, in day-to-day life? And good question would be, what happens when they don't have that structure and expectations in place? So I think, unfortunately, lots of them end up in rescue centres when they don't have that, because they end up frustrated, which leads to them being quite frustrating to live with. Because a Border Collie that is not having their needs met and does not understand how to be the best dog that they can be, then yeah, they're probably going to get a bit scratchy and a bit, not much fun to live with. Now, some common signs that a collie is struggling with unclear boundaries might include things like them growling at us, maybe nipping. For things like being moved off the sofa when people are moving around from room to room, or, if you've got visitors and you're trying to pull them back, they might sort of redirect on you. Those sorts of things might tell us that there's something a little bit amiss in the relationship. The other thing that we might see is demand barking. Border Collies are really good at sharing their opinions, aren't they? And they can do demand barking for all sorts of reasons, but maybe their schedule isn't being kept to, certain person is supposed to walk them at a certain time, or their meal hasn't been prepared in time. Generally speaking, demand barking because they're looking to hurry you up about something. And the word stubbornness gets thrown around a lot when it comes to living with a Border Collie. So it might look like they're refusing to do something they understand. And they look at you and they give you that look and they're like, yeah, whatever, I don't want to. So that stubbornness can often come out when there's not sort of a clear structure and rules in place. And generally speaking, they're just a bit pushy about getting their own way. And another way of putting it would be that they're sort of doing what they want on their own terms. So it feels very much like you get to live with your Border Collie instead of your Border Collie lives with you. All right, you are the lucky one as opposed to the other way round. Now, the problem is that often owners are unintentionally sending mixed signals about their expectations. So I've got some mistakes that I prepared to for this particular podcast, and some of the first sorts of mistakes that I see when working with someone are things like the person repeating themselves. So instead of asking for a sit once, they might say sit, 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 sit. That they'll repeat themselves a few times before the dog does what they ask. Then they might ask for a sit, but the dog, for whatever reason, goes into a down, and then they reward the dog for going into a down. And they normally add something like, well, that was nearly right. So they feed the dog for going into a down. So often that lack of clarity about what constitutes a successful behavior is part of the issue. So like I say, if you ask for a sit, but you get a down, but you still pay for the down, your clarity is a bit unsure about what is expected, never mind the dog's. And likewise, with something like a recall, I've had people say to me, oh, yeah, they can recall, but then they don't come all the way to me. So again, the clarity over what the criteria of the behaviour is a little bit muddy for the person. And given that we're the ones that lay down the criteria for our dogs, you can see why sometimes they get confused. Now, I've got a few examples of students that have maybe come to me and said, Gemma, I don't understand why they're not doing this, because I followed all of your advice and it's like, it's just not working. So what I will often say to these people is video it, film yourself doing it, and then let's have the dog have their input into what's going on. So one of my really good students, Steve, with a little Border Collie called Orla, he was having an issue with his settle training. And it was particularly frustrating for him because he would be doing sort of a work call during the day and Orla would be fidgeting and just generally maybe give the odd little woof to let him know that she was still there. And, he was really struggling. He'd sort of hit a wall with it. And we filmed what was happening. And I said to him, okay, film what's happening. And what we found is that Orla was very inadvertently, I mean, Steve wasn't aware of it, but she was prompting Steve to reward her. So she was laying down very nicely. She was following the protocol. She was lying down on her mat next to him in the office. But then what she would do is she would sort of shift a little bit in her seat. She'd shift a little bit in her bed. And then he would go, oh, good dog. And then he would pop down the treat at that point. So Steve thought that he was rewarding her for being settled. But actually, when you looked at the video, he was rewarding Orla for prompting him in some way, shape, or form by some movement in the bed because it was kind of reminding him that she was down there. Now, with settle training particularly, what we're looking to do is reward stillness. We're looking to reward the dog not doing anything as opposed to any fidgeting. And it was just a small detail, but it's important in the scheme of being able to get that behaviour successful and in that frustration that the two of them were finding between them. Now, one of my more recent students, Sue and Breeze, she came to me actually for a workshop just last weekend, and she found that things had been going along really. Breeze is a lovely dog, a very sweet dog, but she was struggling with some bits and pieces out and about in terms of loose lead walking and recall. And what she's found is that his self-control around treats and toys isn't where she thought it was. When I gave her a few different challenges, actually Breeze said, "Yeah, no, I can't do those things." And what's helpful is that when dogs do things on stuff like treats and toys, we don't mind about it so much. It doesn't produce an emotional response in us. But if the dog is reacting to, say, another dog or, a person around them, that kind of thing, that sort of thing really bothers us and we worry about it. But the truth of it is, if we are not educating the dog around, their treats and their toys, they're not going to have that education to be able to deal with kind of real life challenges out and about. And that's why it's so important to address them. So one of the key things about, getting a better relationship with our Border Collies and having clearer expectations is that we have to improve, our own skills and expectations, because if we don't, then we're not going to be able to change our dog's behavior, because essentially we're the ones giving them the information. So if we're not giving good information, understandably, our dog's behavior is unlikely to change as well. Now, my new Collie Culture Unleashed students have been with me for just under 2 weeks now. But a few of them have come back to me and they've been realizing their dog's training isn't as solid as they thought, just on basic things. So we haven't been diving into, difficult things like car chasing or reactivity and other bits yet, but just sort of the basics and making sure that the foundation is strong. And one of my students, Gemma, told me this. She said, "I've realized that Roma is still in nursery stage and that I've been asking too much of her in difficult environments where she doesn't understand the commands in our living room. But I see that as a positive because now I know what we can work on. She seems much happier and calmer since we started the training. I think she needs this in her life to reduce her anxiety. I've also noticed that she's been more resilient, confident on walks, and has surprised me doing things I didn't think she'd cope with." So that's just under 2 weeks of just focusing on basics and just getting a lot more clarity about what our expectations are with sort of rules and structure in place. All right. And the thing is, the role confidence plays in clearer structure and expectations is helpful for both ends of the lead. It really, really is. So Laura and Sheena are a couple of my students, and their progress with trusting each other, with Sheena being off the lead, has improved massively since they set some goals at the beginning of January. And she said, our January goals have seen a massive improvement in woodland walks, and we've cut the long line down from 20 metres to 2.5 metres. And I have a lot more confidence in dropping the long line and trusting Sheena. And here's the thing, that gives them both more walking freedom. Laura gets to enjoy walking Sheena more without constantly, scanning and worrying that Sheena's not going to listen to her when, something appears. But Sheena gets that all important off lead running time that she needs too. So the beauty of being able to help them with that recall is that it's feeding back into their relationship. It's feeding back into meeting Sheena's needs in terms of that off lead exercise. But it all started with just being much clearer about what it is that we were expecting of Sheena, and then reinforcing, those specifics. Now, I want to, at this point, just say there's an important note to be made. It's about striking a balance between being clear with your collie, but not being a sergeant major. All right. I'm not encouraging people to go out and saying things louder or being firmer, and being like, sit, being cross. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's about taking responsibility for our dog's learning. That's what I'm suggesting that we need to do. Because when they do something that we don't like, we have to accept that we're their teacher. All right. We are the person that gave them their skills to be able to deal with the world that we put them in. So if they can't do something, we can change that. We can totally change that, but only if we accept that we perhaps need a bit more understanding to be able to do so. Now, here's some key skills that I think that we need to develop as owners of Border Collies to help them behave better. So first off would be communicating exactly what's required. All right. And to do that, you need to be clear about exactly what's required. So I often think that taking a piece of paper and writing stuff down and just like brainstorming what it is that you're trying to achieve is a really good place to start, because clarity will make a lot more sense when it comes to actually communicating what you want from your dog. Being consistent with whatever it is. So whatever you've decided the rules and the structure looks like, you have to be consistent with it. So it has to look like that, even if somebody is visiting your home and you might be distracted. It has to look the same, whether or not, for example, jumping up on the sofa, whether or not the dog is allowed on the sofa when they're clean or when they're muddy. It has to look the same. We need to be consistent across the board. We have to be good at making decisions in the moment about how we respond to their behavior. And that one I think is tricky. I think that one takes a bit of practice. So knowing what to do when the dog, you ask them to do something and then they don't do it. What do I do? What is the next piece of the puzzle? And that will be different from scenario to scenario, but working out how we respond is really crucial, because our response to whatever behavior they offer is going to lead them to either doing it again or not doing it again, depending on how we reinforce it. We need to work out how to motivate our dogs to perform the behaviors we're after. So giving out dried biscuits may not encourage them to want to perform the behavior again, but equally it may not be about bringing out the highest value treats. One of the things that I think people don't appreciate enough is that some of the things that motivate a Border Collie are asking them difficult questions, like asking them to use their brains, that being able to use their superpower is actually reinforcing to them. So one of the conversations I've had recently with my new online students is some of the dogs seem a little bit bored by some of the basic stuff that we're going over. But having watched videos, it looks like those dogs are being asked to repeat a sit, repeat a sit, repeat a sit. So one of the things I've suggested to them is that whilst the answer that you're looking for might be sit, can we change the question slightly each time? So instead of, it's sit and there's nothing else going on. Okay, now I'm going to ask them to do a sit when there's food in a bowl on the floor. Now I'm going to ask them if they can sit when there's food, just a few bits on the floor. Now I'm going to ask them, can they do it when there's a toy about, and building it up. So the answer remains the same. It's a sit that I'm looking to reinforce, but I'm making the question slightly different each time. So understanding how to motivate our dogs to perform those behaviors we're after is crucial. And managing our dogs' arousal levels. This is really important. If we are not managing those arousal levels more effectively, then they are not going to be in a state to learn. So understanding how to get them into sort of the optimum state to learn in both a way that is helpful and builds on what they're under. So too calm, for example, doesn't achieve what we're looking for. So if the dog is finding it too easy and it's too calm, then you can practice and that will have some use. But actually, we want to be pushing on to be able to help it stand up in the real world as well. But understanding how to do that is an important piece of being able to teach them. And being adaptable. Okay, so accepting that maybe the way that we've always done things isn't working with this dog. So we might need to learn more, or we might need to do things differently with this particular dog that is in front of us. I'm coming across recently, I've come across a lot of Border Collies who my friend Suzanne Clothier would describe as thin slice dogs. And by which she means, that they they have to be given things in very small pieces, and they have to understand in these very small pieces in order to be able to build the whole puzzle. And if you give them too much in one go, then it's too much for them, and they cannot give you the answers that you're after. So like I say, accepting you might need to do things differently for the dog that you have in front of you is really important. And then it probably doesn't get talked about enough, but I think empathy and patience in dog training is really like valuable. It's very, very important, because if I look at a situation and the dog says, no, I'm not doing this, and I look at it from a, no, I won't do this, I'm being difficult, I'm being stubborn, that's not having very much empathy from their point of view and how they're viewing the issue. And things like a dog reacting to another dog, or a dog reacting to traffic, maybe not coming back when called. And, those things can be really frustrating for us as human beings. Absolutely. And frustration will get in the way of our ability to be empathic. But that's why I always suggest to people that they come home and they do kind of a debrief of a bad walk, so that they can go, oh, okay, that was a lot, but okay, let's break it down. What was going on from my dog's perspective as well as from mine? And then patience. Patience. When someone is learning something new, and that is both us and our dog, incidentally, we're both learning how to do this together. We're going to need to have patience with this and speak to ourselves and our dogs in a way that we would to somebody that we love, with that sort of calm, like understanding of, this is, Rome wasn't built in a day. Well, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure this out together. All right. This is a team effort. So I wanted to give you some practical steps that you can take to start being able to set clearer expectations. So what I'd like you to do is film a training session of some simple behaviours, like sits and downs, something like that, in your living room at home. Just get somebody to hold your mobile phone up. It doesn't need any fancy filming equipment at all. It doesn't need to be very long. Just a 2-minute session will give you quite a lot of information to be able to review. And here's what I want you to review when you watch the session back. I want you to ask yourself these questions. So first off, how many times do you ask your dog to do something before they respond? All right, that's the first thing. Make a little note of that. I want you to watch the video, and I want you to look at, are you just using verbal cues, or do you find yourself using hand signals too, or body gestures? Sometimes people will sort of lean over and do other bits and pieces. So are you using physical cues in some way alongside the verbal cues that you're giving? How do you sound when you're giving your instructions? Do you sound like someone who is calm and in control, or do you sound a little bit harsh? Do you sound a little bit cross? When you're giving those instructions, do you sound like somebody that you would like to receive instructions from? What do you reward? Okay, have a really good look at what you're rewarding. So are you clear on what the word sit means as a for example? So for me, what it looks like is my dog's bum is on the floor. Their front feet are completely still. My dog does not move until they hear me give permission to move, their release word of okay. And that's, that stillness is what I am rewarding. Now, often when I've seen people do this in the past, and I've reviewed video of people doing an exercise like this, we might get puddying feet. We might get little dancing feet where the dog, really helpful, they're trying to come up and get that treat out of your hand. And so you don't get that stillness. They might move before you give them permission to move. You might not have a word that means that they have permission to move. And that's something worth thinking about. How do they know when the behavior starts and stops? How many rewards are you giving for any particular behavior? Are you paying for all behavior, or are you just focusing on paying for good behavior? Does your dog have the same clarity as mine do about, this is what I'm rewarding and nothing else? All right. So those are things to have a look at in just a short training session, because having a look at just something simple like a sit or a down like that will give you an enormous insight into what expectations your dog has about, how life should be lived with you. All right. And it's really important to understand from their perspective, not what you think, but from their perspective, what they, what information you give them and how clear you are on what your expectations are. Now, the thing is, and I know I almost sound like a little bit of a nag, and I don't mean it like that. I mean it to be helpful, because I know that there are lots of people out there struggling with Border Collies, and truthfully, there are an awful lot of Border Collies in rescue situation, and ideally, I don't think any of us would want that for this wonderful breed. So the thing about it is that clear boundaries positively impact the bond that we have between us and our collies. All right. It, no, nothing bad will come of having clear boundaries with your dog. It will only be for the positive, provided it's done obviously in a kind and a fair way. This is because it actually makes them feel more secure and loved because we're honoring the dog that we have. All right. The loyal, biddable working breed that we've chosen to share our life with. It's sort of written into them that doing the thing that we want, think one man and his dog type thing. It's who they are. All right. And they need that rules and structure in place to help them, fulfill who they are. Now, a phrase I learned from Professor Brené Brown, she's also an author. Look her up. She's an amazing woman. But she sums it up really nicely. And it's the phrase, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. All right. Collies with clear rules and structure in their lives are happier dogs. Full stop. Okay. Collies with clear rules and structure in their lives are happier dogs. All right. And if you're the person providing that clarity, it has a positive impact on your relationship. If you're someone that your dog can trust, can lean into when it gets tricky, because you are that person that is giving those boundaries and setting that framework, that's a really positive thing, and it's really good for your relationship with them. I look at it like this, that loving them for who they are rather than who we might like them to be is essential. All right. They are little workaholics. They are delightful little workaholics. And they do need that structure to be able to help them be the best that they can. Now, one mindset shift that I'd love every collie owner to take away from this particular episode is this. Your Border Collie is genetically wired to please you. All right. It's in their DNA. It's not me making stuff up. This is part of their DNA. They are genetically wired to please their people. But, and it's a big but, if they don't know how to do that, it can have a massive impact on their mental well-being. All right. I'm going to repeat that because I think it's important. If they don't know how to do that, it can have a massive impact on their mental well-being. All right. So by focusing on clearer expectations and boundaries, you're going to have a happier collie. Fact. You just are. All right. So just having a think over your day-to-day life with your dog and how clear your expectations are, the boundaries that you set in their life. When you really start to focus in on those things, like I say, you're going to have a happier collie and their mental well-being is going to be positively affected. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope this episode gave you that extra boost to make a difference to your collie's behaviour. Today's episode was sponsored by my Border Collie training membership, Collie Culture Club. In the club, you get personalised feedback on your training, weekly live sessions with myself and other guest experts, community Facebook group support, and Facebook Lives for Q&A sessions throughout the week as and when needed. And don't forget, you can find information about this and all the resources mentioned in the Facebook group. So head over there now. In the next episode, we'll be talking about the importance of mental stimulation and giving our collies gainful employment instead of them going self-employed with jobs we'd rather they didn't do. So stay tuned. So until next time, stay focused on progress, not perfection. And remember, every small win counts.